Important thing is around is the method and its role of the ballot. Only through fracturing its history that paints the state as inevitable, as benign, good, or controlled representation of colored body or the bodies of women can we begin a real process of change their faith in changing the state or modifying the dance history of the insidious manipulations of the law. Only through burning down material structures that maintain the state can we achieve any form of liberation. This is how we access the role of the ballot, which they simply can't do. Psychological violence is the only outcome of a method that allows for the domination of hierarchy or narrative to stay intact. The other team other team is complicit in this dominant forms of dominant forms of history and this dominant forms of in these dominant forms of history, and without fracturing, they don't have any solvency. Only promote forms of psychological violence. So now let's go through. First of all, let's go through the ballot. First of all, they make an argument to talk about like how like the ballot gives them a microphone. The ballot fundamentally does not give you the ballot doesn't give you a microphone. Like if anything, if only winning this round isn't really doing anything. If both of the teams coming in here, the record is 0-4, and you go and tell them that you won run around on this doesn't mean you get anything. This doesn't get you any solvency in a round saying that you won one round of this compared to all the other rounds that you simply lost. And that's assuming that you do these kind of arguments in all the other rounds of this. But you don't. You definitely have a lack of fidelity about what should and should not be done in a round. So if puts them fundamentally in a double, fundamentally puts them in a double bind. If they say that the ballot is needed and victory is needed to go back and tell people at the academy that they won, it is fundamentally problematic. Both teams right now are 0-4. You go back to the academy and tell them you won one round of all your 5 rounds that you won it on. This is simply is going to be problematic. They don't really have any solvency. Just winning on a round. It pretty much they still will be technically losing even if they get this one ballot. Also, two, they also they make this like root cause inevitable argument. Look, we don't say structural violence or inevitable or psychological violence inevitable. We say these things are only inevitable in a situation where like history and representations of women painted as fundamentally different with fundamentally different roles in our society is what's going to be problematic, which is why we're going to beat them on the question of root cause. Like saying giving people equality simply doesn't solve. Historically, this is felt, and the lack of historical analysts would provide for that. Historically, like giving black people things like the right to vote has historically felt, but I get back to that more on proper at the bottom of this flow. Also, 3, they say it's a question of like doing liberation, but it's a question of like it becomes a question of like who are the liberals. They take a stance like it is us. Like they don't ask the question of why does us as white males who have the privilege to come into this debate space and talk about the like issues of women. They say that we are the liberators. It's just kind of a part of the problem in the rhetoric we're talking about. Even if you do even if you do give them any solvency, it's the problem with the rhetoric. The idea that is like it is that like the responsibility. Like instead of like coming in here maybe like reading a narrative or talking about something that has happened in a more personal germane past, they come in here and say these things are bad. We have a responsibility to solve it without letting voices be heard in this round, which is inherently going to be problematic. Which is why we're going to solve better. They also have a diss about like homogenization, which they do not understand the homogenization diss. Also, for second and first, we cannot homogenize ourselves. We're talking about experiences that are germane to our family, germane to ourselves. I don't understand this homogenization arguments. Also, they said something like ghetto culture. I don't know what the fuck that's about on the flow, but it's probably problematic. It's probably problematic in and of itself. Second. The second part is like, look, you don't understand the homogenization, so I'll go ahead and extend this here. Look, we said it's pretty simple. Like, you homogenize that like all women is experience things like sexual violence differently. It's just inherently problematic because first of all, it is not true women of color. So experience things like sexual violence inherently different than other people. Also, the question of like gender queer people doesn't answer. You said something about lesbians, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about also queer males in the military who also experience forms of rape. If your case is talking about silence, it's inherently problematic when you say things like, look, this is the most pertinent issue in the military right now, not these other forms of violence as well. That means you force the silence on like racialized, genderized bodies and queer bodies, regardless of their male, female, or distinctively something different. This is going to be the problem with their performance. It only like links them back into what they do. This is going to be problematic. If silence is really important to the entirety of the case, they should do more than just when they say like we must prioritize this one form of repression instead of all the other forms of repression that happen in things like the military. This is problematic. This is going to fundamentally turn their case. They talk about creating equality, but it's only equality for certain particular groups, which is going to be problematic. And let's see. And okay, now let's go to the stuff proper. Historical analysis is going to be key. It is only through fracturing the lives of white linear history can we uncover the seeds of oppression and challenge them when they see the creed fracturing it as a speech act of liberation through our historical analysis. The negative lack of history allows for the system to return to our problems that led to the present day creates a form of lack of serial policy failure that simply can't resolve. And a negative example is going to be like the civil rights movement gave black civil rights, but 30 years later, almost 60% of the black male population has been incarcerated and imprisoned with a felony in itself. Look, giving people equality based on law doesn't actually give them equality. It only makes these things more sinister. We must understand how to control the representation of white history, values, and devalues or oppress people. It's a historical narrative as women as mothers or women as people who should take care of the home that's going to be problematic. You simply don't challenge this. Like, giving them equality doesn't change these notes, and you don't answer anything in our political extent, our case arguments that talk about forms of psychological violence. So a woman has to role play as a masculine form of action, because in the military, the ideal of masculinity as being first and foremost and first and important is it's going to be the act of or ideal like the war or the military as inherently masculine is going to be problematic, because it forces women to have to role play as something as they're not. It's creates from double conscious, because once they try to role play, they are considered bitchy or too aggressive and not the passive women they should be. This is double conscious and creates cycle violence in the military, and they simply cannot solve this by giving people equality. We can never giving people equality. Extend our moral technique evidence on the present separation from our identities and our history that's allowed for genocidal violence and insinuous psychological violence is what drives people away from the military, and what drives people to be silent is these forms of things that they simply can't solve for. This is why you can prefer the negative position in around. We saw that, look, the negative draws the entirety of the app, plus more, and there's fundamental differences in what we do, which my partner will take the terms later, but right quick on the role of ballot. The role of ballot is best performance liberation around, First of all, you're going to vote for us because our form of liberation is fracturing white linear notions of history, and which helps us burn down the immaterial structures of the state. The idea that the state is benign goodness, that the idea that the state can be fixed. These are all ideas that we have to reduce forms of history, through forms of history. Only through fracturing that history can we realize the state isn't some benign good. It can't really solve forms of oppression or social struggles. It can only do these piecemeal solutions, but I'll get to that proper now. All right. Just what is this thing we call the state? The state is a machine that's structured to maintain the myth of white male superiority. The white male apparatus can never lead to any kind of liberation. Any attempt to overcome the myth leads to co-option and restructuring of oppression. Even worse, the state becomes even more clever and insidious about finding ways to justify the myth of white superiority. Or once again, history proved the implementation of things like Jim Crow laws, inequality for minorities, lynching, segregated schools, and poll taxes prove that the state's priority is to maintain the myth. And even when these forms of oppression are challenged, the white male state apparatus is reconfigured and structured oppression and become more insidious and harder to fight. So Jim Crow became the segregation of urban areas, and the suburb lynching became the death penalty which disproportionately affects minority communities. Segregated schools became poorly funded public education and better private school, and poll taxes became racist gerrymandering. Look, we attempted to work within the state, and every time our efforts have failed, it's only the state that sees our hands to stop liberation. We have decided to take matters in our own hands, and us as debaters in this space who have the best forms of liberation is why we have an alternative that says we must burn the state down. The state cannot coexist with our forms of liberation, which means they don't get the permit. Burner will take that on. Proper all states are planning to ask political liberation can only come through the independent action on our part. Since the two-party system is a sane animal who's two heads that feed from the same trough, we must liberate ourselves from these bad form of politics. This is the only way we can have any. This is the only way we're going to have any solvency around. So look, at the end of this, you're going to look at a few key arguments that's going to be on the floor. First, it's going to be the homogenization argument, because they homogenize things like if the methodology and part of the problem is the question of no longer being silent. If they're silent on particular forms of issues, then literally in the last speech, they say the most upfront problem is one thing, so we must talk about it first. That's fundamentally a silencing of other forms and other issues in the military in and of itself, which means they're going to have a performative contradiction. This is going to be disabled because it's creating double conscious and psychological violence. So for maybe telling queer males that the most important, queer males in the military, like the most important issue that they should talk about is violence against women and not the violence against themselves, is inherently going to be problematic. The silencing it turns the entirety of the case, so that's going to be first thing you're on. For two, because of the form of their silence, they disregard violence or the particularity of particular identities of different women of color who experience sexual violence. Inherently, this is going to be a diss to the applicants. It's once again going to be silencing. It's going to also turn the entirety of the argument, because their lack of intersectionality and fluidity undermines the entirety of their advocacy, and it's inherently going to bind around. And even if once again you grant them solvency, they can't solve for double conscious and psychological violence, which is the root cause. Is not a question of equality. The root cause is the question of these double standards presented by people through a lack of because of the dominant narrative of white male superiority, which they simply don't answer on this flow. Also, look, the root cause argument. It's a question. It's a broader systemic question than just the military. They're treated like second-class citizens because of the myth of white male superiority. That's only through history. Fracturing is going to be the only solvency on the case. Look, they asked what the role of the ballot does in this round. For us, it's simple. Role of ballot says we have the best methodology. What the role of ballot even means for them is when they go back to the military, they say it is the idea that white male heterosexual males are inherently superior is the problem. We must take that down before we can get true equality.
On the homogenization argument.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me so you're saying that since we're going after women's problems, we're not addressing other problems?
Well,
this is wrong?
No, what we're saying is that's kind of separate. The homogenization argument is you homogenize the experience of all women, regardless of the particularities of identity.
So how does that operate? How does that argument operate in the light of our like stoic arguments?
Just quite a few ways. Like, we'll have some historical perspective on this later, but like specifically women of color experience sexual violence differently. So is there like their interactions, which you kind of like leave out in the entirety of your narrative, which is going to be problematic for us. Like all women don't experience sexual violence. We all agree sexual violence is definitely problematic.
So we should just solve all of it. And not,
No, we're like, well, very specifically what you do in your last speech is what I'm really criticizing in this round. You say like, sexual violence against women is the most prominent problem. So it leaves the question
Okay,
of queer
I
males
don't
in the
think- I
military.
don't
What
think
should they talk about?
It's not,
if
you're
not
saying the
themselves?
it's not the most
alternative-
prominent problem. It's just like
No, he literally said it's the most
we're
upfront,
saying
prominent
people,
problem.
people who try to put stuff ahead of it.
Yeah, what about
Sounds
queer
like-
males who want to put the fact that
Okay,
they
but I mean,
are,
let's-
yeah, it's not necessarily that. It's something
But
that
that's what
it's
he
like
said.
a large
But we can-
issue.
we
Like
can-
we're
we can-
saying, it's a very large
no,
issue.
we agree that it's a large issue.
Well,
But
Yeah,
he
exactly.
We can
literally
argue
said
later.
that.
Like one question I want to get at is, so your alternative to saying, because for example, we say women problems are bad. You're saying, well, what about queer males? So you're saying your alternative.
We're
is
not
this,
saying what
don't-
about queer males. We're saying your methodology pushes them to the margins who also.
So my
experience
point,
violence.
my point is, your alternative is to do nothing about either one.
No, our alternative is to break down where the violence comes from.
Yeah.
Which is the myth of the
understand.
normative heterosexual white male as being superior.
Yeah, I understand that. So I think that comes back to you say that the white male can never liberate. You pretty much say that.
Well, we say like part of the,
so,
our
so
argument.
pretty much I'm just.
Our argument here is like you come in here and you want the role of the ballot so you can just.
Should I just
look, what we're saying was simple. You can do what you do without justification from the ballot. The ballot only means to you you feel good
Why
about
do
your
you-
forms of liberation.
why do you
go
need
to
the
the
ballot?
zakat, huh?
If we're both trying to liberate, why do you need the
Well,
ballot?
it's a question of method. We say if our method is better, the role of the ballot should be who has the best method, not who
Oh
can
wait,
feel good
okay,
when they
okay.
go to.
You said it's who best liberates, not who has the best
Well,
method.
our best form of liberation is round would obviously be a methodology debate.
Also, when we're talking about.
All right, so my question is, can I, as white male, liberate any individual?
Well, we feel like the method that you choose is bad.
Okay. Is there any method that a white male can take that would solve?
Well,
If I got up and read your affirmative, would that solve? Or would it say, oh no, it's bad because it's coming from the
Well,
voice
it'll
of
be
a
really
white
hard
male?
to read our affirmative because
Yeah.
it
No,
talks about
no,
our
so-
family.
So I
Yeah,
can't.
it's literally
No, no,
talking
no,
about
not like your
Wait.
exact affirmative, but couldn't I take your argument, like investigate folks like war and how it led to oppression?
No, look, we hear what you're saying, but we feel like a better methodology for you would to be kind of push these voices who have been silenced into the debate space by reading some parts from these people, specifically.
I do.
No,
You
for
read quotes from women.
Are you
quotes
ready
from
or?
women is not the same as their story. That's different.
We read their story.
Okay, it's
not
not.
okay.
Go ahead.
You
So,
good?
Go ahead.
Or